The information provided on lifeinterruptedradio.com is for educational purposes only.
I have to sort of tattle on myself today. You know how I always talk about tea? I'm tattling. I have a chai tea in here. I know. It's really strong, but it's got homemade almond milk. I don't know if that counts or not, but it is really good. But I thought, I just felt like it today. And sometimes, I know maybe our guest might shake her finger, but sometimes I just have to treat myself. If my body says, you really feel like that, I figure, okay, I can splurge and have a little of it. So anyway, let me introduce our guest because I am so excited to have her here. And if you have talked to Dr. Nasha Winters for about 5 minutes, you'll realize that she's a walking encyclopedia for integrative medicines. She is an absolute visionary, and she is the CEO of Optimal Terrain, and that's been inspired by more than 25 years of experience in the healthcare industry as one of the thought leaders of personalized precision medicine. I just go, woohoo, thank goodness, thank everything. Well, one thing I have said all along about my medical care through my autoimmune healing journey is if somebody would just pay attention more than me to the set of symptoms, I'm sure we could figure this out. So we'll get more into her bio because I want you to meet her right now. And during the commercial, right before the commercial breaks, I'll tell you more about her bio because it's really, really fantastic. And one of the things we're going to talk about today also is her brand new book called The Metabolic Approach to Cancer. Now, you might be going, oh, cancer, Sharon. I have to tell you that she and I absolutely agree that cancer is like one of those biggie autoimmune conditions. You might be going, really? But she's going to tell you why. So welcome, Nasha. So happy to have you here.
Oh, so wonderful, Sharon. Thank you so much. And I feel like we're on the same path here because I also have dealt with a lifelong pattern of autoimmunity. So these are the things that have informed my understanding in medicine and as well as what is sort of a part of our book as well. So seems perfect that we're together today.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about your story. I was reading the first part of your book where you describe what had you change your vision in medicine. And I say, wow, because I've heard that diagnosis is often not a good ending. So tell us your story.
Certainly. Well, I did come from, my mom would tell you that I kind of popped out into this world already a day late and a dollar short as far as my health. I had a lot of issues, a lot of digestive issues. I couldn't tolerate any form of milk as a kid, lots of allergies, lots of issues. And by the time I was coming into my hormonal age, a kind of a collection of other autoimmune conditions, including endometriosis. A lot of people don't realize that's actually an autoimmune. Yes. Okay. Polycystic ovarian, same thing. Later in life, found out I had Hashimoto's.
Here.
We got this, right? And later in life, Hashimoto's, as well as when I tested out for some other lovely collections, because as you know, in the autoimmune world, if we have one, especially as women, we tend to collect them. So I also found out I had RA and celiac.
Collect something like ceramic elephants.
Wouldn't that be great? I would much rather collect ceramic elephants or unicorns, right? So, but that being said, it wasn't exactly a surprise that into my teens and right before the age of 20, I ended up being diagnosed mainly by accident because they were going down the wrong rabbit hole for some time. But I was diagnosed with a stage 4 ovarian cancer process. And
that is shocking to me. That is not a good diagnosis.
It's not. It's, and again, as far as cancers go, my sisters on this journey who've also been through this, I tell them, don't get attached to the statistics that are online because they're grim. When we have an average of 25,000 women a year diagnosed with this condition, over 17,000 of those die. That is not something you want to hang your hat on and focus. So I always tell folks, let's not be the statistic. And I'm here to tell you, as well as hundreds, if not thousands of my other women on this journey, that you don't have to be that statistic. But interestingly enough, just a little pearl into this is a precursor, a well-known predisposition to ovarian cancer is actually polycystic ovarian syndrome. And so now I can look back to understand how my autoimmune proclivities, if you will, also fed into part and parcel of the process that I call cancering. I call that it's a verb for me because it's a process, right? It's not an event. It's not like you went to bed one night and woke up the next day with cancer. It doesn't work that way. And so part of what I've learned in my 25 years of exploring my own body, my own terrain, and my own understanding of how and why I ended up in that boat, if you will, has also helped me understand that for tens of thousands of other patients, and was ultimately what led to the writing of the book that my colleague, Jess Higgins Kelly, and I put together, The Metabolic Approach to Cancer. And it really is a very comprehensive approach that takes into account even autoimmunity and the things that feed into that process.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to say I did get a copy of it and I read it. I love it. And I kept sort of scratching out the word in my mind, cancer, and going autoimmune, because so much of it made sense in my learnings and all the over 130 episodes I've done of the Autoimmune Hour, that I was like, oh yeah, this, just scratch out the word cancer and do all this for autoimmune too.
Great. I'm glad to hear that, because that was ultimately our goal. But because I've been working exclusively with patients with cancer for the last several years before the birth of the book, it was that, the publicist and whatnot felt it was best to name it sort of appropriately, though Jess and I both had the vision that you could cross out the word cancer and put in autoimmune, diabetes, osteoporosis, cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, any of the chronic illnesses that plague us today.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yes, absolutely. But let's first just go back to the title a little bit and describe metabolic for people. The title might be like, what is that? So what is the metabolic approach?
Well, beautifully, this concept, we're trying to also launch a new language into the masses. The metabolic discussion around oncology is, well, actually, it's not new. It's been around since the 1920s, since Otto Warburg's time, who was a famous biochemist at that time, who understood kind of an underlying metabolic kind of biochemical process that was happening in the cells that was more of the precursor to a cancering process versus the somatic theory that took root in our culture and our understanding of cancer, which is the idea that, the prevalent idea today still is that DNA damage is what causes cancer, that it's just a Russian roulette game, that it's simply bad luck, that there's nothing we can do about it, and it just is the way it is. Whereas folks from the Otto Warburg time, and thanks to people like Dr. Thomas Seyfried, who wrote a very heady book called Cancer as a Metabolic Disease, that came out in 2010 or 2011, he sort of resurrected these ideas from the 1920s and helped us understand that let's take it back one step from DNA damage being the cause of cancer, and to take it to the place where it's more of the mitochondria and how they're behaving and how they're functioning and how many there are and how efficient they are. That is really the precursor to either healthy or diseased cells. Okay. And so, for instance, DNA damage would not occur if we have healthy mitochondria. And mitochondria becomes the root discussion, cause, etiology of all of our chronic illness issues today. And when we talk about metabolism or metabolic aspects, mitochondria are the powerhouses. They're the energy creators, generators of the cells in our body, and they're little organelles that live in each and every cell of our body. And in some tissues of the body, such as the heart, we have a lot more mitochondria than we do in, say, the finger, the tissue of our skin. And so when that mitochondria gets kind of damaged or weak, which there's a million different reasons why that can happen, then it becomes susceptible to the DNA damage that then leads to chronic illness. One path, it might lead to cancer, another to autoimmunity, another to diabetes, another to autism, another to Alzheimer's. So when we can change the fuel source and the fuel response, the energy factory of our cells, we can have an outcome. And that metabolism is simply a term for energy. Okay. And so when we can change that energy source and efficiency, we can change a lot of things in our body.
Oh, yes, absolutely. In your book, I was just enthralled with that idea that it's changeable, because I think, and I'll just use the term white coat authority because I hate to sort of point the finger at anything, but we've all experienced a white coat authority in our health journey. Yeah. Oftentimes, I remember when I got my diagnosis, it was like a tattoo across my forehead. Right. Chronic, lifelong, forever, get used to it, live with it, won't change.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess for me it worked because I'm a polarity responder, and I kind of went, I'll show you.
See, that's what I was. That's another thing in common. Tell me I can't do it, and I'll show you otherwise.
Right. But I worry because I think there are some who would just like get very defeated at that idea that it cannot change.
Right.
But I do know it's a process because I know it probably took me a number of years to get to that point of the diagnosis. So I can't expect to pop a pill and tomorrow, 2 aspirin and in the morning wake up fine. It's going to take a process to get out of it. And that's what I liked about your book. I mean, there's a lot of information in there and you're not going to get well overnight. But what I loved about it, it was a process that I could understand. Mm-hmm. So we talked a little bit about mitochondria and DNA. And I know, let's go a little bit deeper though into what do we inherit and what can we control besides the mitochondria? Are there things that maybe, maybe we're not there yet, or maybe we already have the autoimmune, but at this point, what can we control? Because sometimes it feels like our body is out of control.
Such a good, and I think that's a really good question, because in fact, the very night that we launched our book, we were sitting in the bookstore and in our local bookstore, and a woman doesn't even live in my town, was visiting our town and saw the book title, and she just sort of scoffed. I mean, she was actually pretty angry and said, "I did everything right, and yet I still got cancer." Right? Now, I'm here to tell you, as someone who has evaluated the labs, the medical histories, the toxicant exposures, the epigenetics, meaning what we've inherited from our family of origin, I'm here to tell you that someone who ends up with a diagnosis of cancer or an autoimmune condition was not healthy once that diagnosis came to be. They may not have known it very blatantly, but once we start to explore that, they suddenly start to realize, gosh, you're right, I did start to notice aches or pains, in this part of my body, or I did start to notice that my hormones were off, or I did start to notice that my food cravings didn't match what I actually needed, or just a lot of different things. Or they might have said, gosh, I worked on a golf course, or, cooked in Teflon forever and ever and ever. And these are, now we're starting to understand a lot of the cause and effect. And so when folks really explore, which is what we hope that the book offers, are some ways to explore. So we have these questionnaires for each of these terrain possible obstacles, if you will, that could go wrong and cause some damage. When we really explore, we start to realize there's a lot around us, maybe unbeknownst to us, that's causing some discourse. And then the nice thing about it is we don't tell you the bad news without also telling you the good news, that there's also something you can do about it, right? And so one of the things we try to drive home is, even if you choose, say, one section or one chapter to focus on, and you make some significant changes, for instance, say maybe you focus on getting a water filtration system in your home. Maybe that's where you start. It's going to have a positive impact. It's going to have a spiraling positive impact, and it's going to touch all these other parameters. So each and every change you make, each and every moment you have an awareness of what some of those exposures might have been that caused you some disharmony, you're going to make a positive shift. And it, like you said, it doesn't happen overnight. I have some clients who are like, I want to hit it all today, and I'm going to change everything right now. Right? Definitely.
Of course. That's exactly.
Exactly. And then we're going to have a few that are like, even 2 things is stressful and overwhelming. The beauty is it doesn't matter. Whatever is right for you is the perfect starting point. Just start somewhere. And you can start to sort of etch away at changing your terrain, changing what is wrapped, what is involved. A lot of us get associated with our diagnoses, okay, whatever that is. And it starts to remind you, when you start to look into the whole terrain, that you are much more than a diagnosis. And we're trying to help people remember that. So hopefully just knowing anywhere you start is going to be beneficial. And then to have some aha moments of, wow, that new couch I got that's just drenched in flame retardant, maybe that's where my system really took a shock and started to change. Things like that, examples that would have been otherwise things we didn't have to think about 20, 30, 40 years ago.
The information provided on lifeinterruptedradio.com is for educational purposes only. What you hear, read, and see on Life Interrupted Radio is based on experience only. The information presented here should never be used for any legal, diagnostic, or treatment purposes. Always seek sound legal, medical, and or professional advice regarding any problems, conditions, and any of the recommendations you see, hear, or read here on Life Interrupted Radio. You've been listening to Life Interrupted Radio. To learn more, listen to other shows, and gain free resources that can help empower your life, be sure to stop by lifeinterruptedradio.com.